Welcome back to another episode of Boomer Bust, your home for NFL Draft Talk. I'm your host, Terry, and today doing my final thoughts on the D-line for the 2018 NFL Draft class. So, we are 4 days away now? Oh my God, getting so close. Okay, so, yes, final thoughts to the D-line. This D-line class is pretty decent. It's something you rarely see, I should say, is when you have a defensive tackle class that is so much more, I would say, loaded with talent than a defensive end class. And that's the case this year. So with D-line, got D ends and D tackles. And of course, we all hear about Bradley Chubb, but outside of Bradley Chubb, then the well kind of runs a little bit drier in that sense, which is unique. We don't see that a lot, especially in this day and age where you see a lot of college teams taking athletes and putting them at that defensive end spot and converting them from different things and really building up that pass rusher position, as it is important. And so typically, even if you don't have a guy like Bradley Chubb or a couple guys like Bradley Chubb, then typically you got a number of guys like Marcus Davenport who are these height, weight, speed type prospects that project to end up being something. But you don't really got a lot of those this year, to be honest with you. So, and then the other thing that's interesting about this class, there's not a lot of 3-4 guys. And I might have mentioned this before, but just quickly talking about there's between odd front and even front guys. It's very big, and I know some people think there's not a big difference, but there definitely is. The skill set's different, the body type is different, the assignments are usually different. When you're talking about an odd front where you're two-gapping somebody and you are literally trying to hold up and eat up blocks, than a penetrating, even front where you're trying to get up the field into your gap and be explosive and get off your blocks. It's two different styles, two different body types. And usually what you look for in, a 3-4 guy is someone that, has good height because you want them to have long arms. So you're talking about 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", 6'7". And then you're talking about almost 300 pounds, right around that 300-pound area. And you just don't got a lot of those guys. I think there's a lot of tweeners this year, a lot of DNs that project inside to 3 technique. There's not a lot of nose tackles. Like, of course, we got the big 2, but there's not a lot of them. So anyway, as far as a grade, I gave this group a C-. And to reiterate, I grade on top level talent, and then I grade based off the depth of the class. And so it's not a lot of top level talent. I mean, there's Bradley Chubb again. That's really what hurts, because for defensive tackles, you got Deron Payne, you got Vita Vea, and then I would say next tier you got Tim Settle, Taven Bryan, Maurice Hurst. So it's a good handful of names. But then Bradley Chubb, there's such a huge drop off after Bradley Chubb that, it kind of really hurts the whole group. And then as far as depth, again, there's not a lot of DNs and a lot of them might project inside. So there's a whole long list of guys that I think can play on the interior or will play on the interior. However, none of them are any top level type talent. And so there's so many guys on here that are just tweeners and got real questions about what position will they play next year. And you could have a tweener you think of last year with Solomon Thomas, who was definitely a tweener, but with some next level athletic talent that people felt comfortable taking him high and betting on him. And you just don't really have a lot of that this year. So anyway, so going into some of my favorite people, and I've always said I'm a D-line guy. That's my position by trade. So I'm always going to be excited by the top guys. Like those guys, for the most part, are usually the ones that, excite me. So without, hesitation, I would say Bradley Chubb is somebody that I feel confident in, because his floor is just as high as the ceiling almost. And when we talk about floor and ceiling, we're talking about guys that are projects or project to be good once you work with them versus guys that have skills right now. And he has both. I think it's really going to come down to what team he goes to and what skill, because he has the frame. So if you go to an odd front or a team that plans on move him around, because people think he can play DN and a 3-4 in stand up and probably interchange. And, you don't really see that anywhere. And so if he were to do that, I would be interested to see what type of body type they would try to build him into, because playing inside on the odd front, there's a lot of double teams and he's going to have to be real strong now. In college, he was a double team splitter by athleticism and snap jump. He wasn't, going to manhandle a double team. So it'll be interesting to see if someone tries to do that with him. If it's a 4-3, then you can see him losing a little more weight to get a little more explosive, play around 265, 260. Or if it's a stand-up position on the outside, definitely I think he would have to play in the 250 range around there, just to even get more explosion. So I'm excited to see what he's going to do, but his motor is so hot. He's got a lot of hand play. There's definitely, he's got to get more consistent, because I just feel like right now, he got to a point where college, he knew he was playing with lower competition because he was so good. And so he just kind of was doing stuff, throwing it out there at times. And so I think Bradley Chubb definitely has a lot of room to get even better than he is. But day one, I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be starting for you. And I love Deron Payne. You got a group of athletic big boys this year that are really interesting. And Deron Payne's one of them. He's that fridge type one you always hear about, the one that plays fullback and tight end on offense, caught a few interceptions. He's just a fun guy, athletic guy, but a big boy as well that can handle the line. And I don't think he's as strong and powerful as Vita Vea, but I think he definitely can change the run game with his ability in the middle. And much like Vita Vea, Deron Payne is a guy that that you definitely want at nose, but could mess around and play some DN too if you wanted to play, or if you want to do a lot of stunt and blitzes. He's got the athleticism where he's going to be an asset and not a liability. So excited to see Deron Payne out of Bama. And then Vita Vea too. The only thing with Vita Vea is generational stopgap mountain of a man. Like, you rarely have ever seen somebody so stout as him. But he just doesn't have that pass rush. I'm telling you, like, and a lot of people are just like, oh man, what are you talking about? He does have pass rush. I'm like, if you watch him, when he gets stunts and movement on the D-line, that's when he can explode through a gap and get up there. But when you talk about one-on-one or one-on-two pass rush, he doesn't beat blocks. He's not a straight up pass rusher. So you're going to have to do some things with him to get him to the quarterback, or on third downs, you take him off the field. That makes you less valuable. I get Vita Vea is a monster. He's a 5-star prospect for me. But for me personally, and what I like to do with D-line, what I look for, he's not as valuable because he doesn't have that straight up pass rush ability. But I do like Vita Vea for, you can't deny those natural talents. Another D tackle that I like is Tim Settle. And I guess he could go into the sleeper section, but Tim Settle out of VTech, if you get a chance to watch him, he plays around 340, 330 like Vita Vea. But it's the exact difference. He's in a penetrating type defense where he's trying to get upfield and get off blocks. And you've seen his ability to move for that weight. You think about what you could do getting him down to 330 or 320, and he could move even better. And then you look at his explosion on some of the blocks and plays that he makes. Now, he's not consistent. He's a big boy with stamina issues, but the plays he makes for his size, like, pop off the screen. And since you had Tremaine Edmonds there, which a lot of people were focused on, he didn't get a lot of love. But I think if you look at Tim Settle, you'll be real surprised. And I I think coming into the draft season, people in the scouting community had him as a late first round pick. The combine didn't help him, so he might drop, but I still think the opinions are the same. And so I think he might end up going a lot higher than casual fans might expect. Then I'm trying to pick some DNs too, that I like. Because, yeah, I mean, and a lot of these guys can be switched. That's the thing. You don't know if they're going to be playing DN or outside linebacker or whatever. But, Deshaun Hand from Bama is also interesting. I like him as a project. I think he just kind of was all over the place with Bama, and they never really set a role down for him. But I think, he is one of the few traditional 3-4 DNs that you got. Now his attitude, seeing him at the Senior Bowl and stuff, it's something you might want to think about. It's not like he's a bad kid. He's just, seems a little diva, a little entitled, a little frustrated when I'm not the best. And so you gotta work at it to be the best. And he just doesn't have that kind of typical mouth closed, head down and play football Bama attitude. But that's okay. I still think he might be interesting to see what he could end up being. And then, one of my favorite guys is Chad Thomas out of Miami. And I talked about him a couple times before. I think he could end up being an outside backer or DN, whichever one you want him. But I would say with Chad Thomas, man, the combine was a huge red flag. And then he's got this big music career, at least in the works, that a lot of people are talking about. They're not sure what type of football player he is and how much he loves it. And I think that's going to be held against him in the draft. But I think if you sat down with him and if you feel comfortable with him, then you might be picking up a gem later in the draft, because despite what the numbers said, and that scares you that he wasn't ready, but on the tape, the man's a freak athlete and he gets after the quarterback. So real excited about him. But yeah, those are kind of some of the guys. Now, some of the players that are more risky, I would say, I wouldn't say that I don't like necessarily, just more risky. And there's a handful of them actually. So, I don't think this guy's going to get a lot of love at the top of the draft, but I know he did coming in, and that's Rasheem Green out of USC, who looks the part in every way with a lot of measurables, a lot of athleticism, but on tape just looked terrible and just weak. I mean, 6'4", 275, getting moved down the field and walked down the field in double teams. That's unacceptable. So he's someone I worry about. Definitely a project. I think, he's going to have to get with the right team to unlock his talent. But I think he's all ceiling instead of floor. And, that's kind of going to be a risk. He might be more boom or bust. So that's someone I would watch out for. And then Taven Bryan out of Florida. First of all, let me just say the comparisons to JJ Watt is ridiculous. Let's stop that. Let's absolutely stop that. Bryan is more of a project as well, just because he's newer to football. He hasn't been playing football as long as these other guys. And so he's still getting better at it. He has super natural, athleticism, but as a football player, technique wise, he's not there. And then there's some real questions about his character, and not so far as that he's gotten in trouble with the law, but definitely with his coaching staff, bumped heads a whole lot. And you hear he's a handful to deal with, and he looks at football like a hobby and not as, a lifestyle. So there's a lot of questions about him as a character, and that scares me. I mean, and people take chances on people with bad character and good athleticism. But I always say, when everybody says the best ability is availability. So despite what stuff he's got talent wise, if he's not going to be there for you, or if he's not going to be prepared to play a game, then none of that matters. So, again, that's part of the game that we don't get to see, and hopefully teams are comfortable with. Yeah, and then some sleepers. So let's get to sleepers real quick. And there's a whole bunch on the D-line. RJ McIntosh from Miami. I also really like him. He's definitely a project. He's all ceiling, but he's got good size, really good athleticism and fluid ability for his size. I think he could possibly be a 3-tech or be a 3-4 DN. Just depending on how you want to use him. But, I see him being an exciting player to see how he develops. Trenton Thompson out of Georgia, almost the exact same thing as McIntosh. Good frame, good athleticism, really good, explosion for his size. Just had some issues at Georgia with injuries and whatnot. And so he's more of a flyer in the project as well, but a lot of good athleticism and long arms for that. And then you got Nathan Shepard out of Fort Hays State, who was just wrecking shop. I'm talking about dominating as much as you could dominate his competition, but it was very, very low level competition. And so now people want to see what he can do at the next level, but it was just an absolute monster in his division. And then you got two NC State boys, BJ Hill and Justin Jones. People think BJ Hill's going to be better, because of his, traditional size, while Justin Jones was the better college player and was just, really athletic for his size and, move around and made some plays. But I wouldn't be, shocked to see both of those two, find somewhere. And other sleepers on the DN side. The one that's interesting is Duke Ejiofor out of Wake Forest. He's going to be an interesting one to see, because Duke has, to me, level 5 hand technique, which is rare, but he's a tweener, 6'4", 264. Not exactly sure where you want to put him, because he just doesn't have that speed and bend off the edge that you want, but he really works through blocks. You wonder if you could put on some weight and have him at a 3-4. I don't know if he could stand up, but you got to find a place for him. And I think he has extremely long. I think he has almost 36-inch arms. So that's going to absolutely help people feel more comfortable having that arm length to keep the distance, but he didn't show the strength or top level speed, and you usually want one or the other. So, but he's got so much ability and technique that I wonder how well he'll end up playing. So he might be interesting. All right. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Go down comment section. Let me know what you think about the D-line group. Any guy that you're looking for your team. Start the conversation. Thumbs up, subscribe, share it around, and thank you for listening.